This might sound rude, but I remember you said you had to use a physical board to play chess to not stare at the screen. But it doesn't bother you anymore. Is there a reason for this? Well, part of the reason is that the physical board that I was using I was using the physical board to play chess for a little bit, but it was starting to give me hand pain because the physical board that I have is quite small. And so the motion is like a little pinching one. And because they're pieces that slot into little holes, I have to kind of tug them out and there's a little bit of resistance. I mean, you can look at the screen now. I mean, yeah, I would like to have more activities without screens because basically all of my distractions and hobbies involve screens right now. I'm trying to, because the thing is with my hands is that even though, there are a lot of activities that hurt them, like using a mouse, typing on a keyboard, writing. I'm trying to find activities that do involve my hands that don't hurt them so that I can avoid losing dexterity, because I feel like if I just avoid using my hands, I'm just going to lose dexterity over time. So I've got drawing back, with the digital drawing is working pretty well. But yeah, it's not rude, Vivian, to ask the question. The only reason I've gone back to screen chess is because I was starting to have hand pain from the little board. When I use the eye tracker, I don't know how to explain this to someone who's never used an eye tracker, but when you're using an eye tracker to move the mouse and control input on a computer, it is, I would say, at least 10 times more tiring than just looking at a screen. Because you're actually using your eyes to aim as an input method. And so that's part of the reason why I was like, okay, I have an eye tracker now. That's brilliant. I can play games on stream now. How can I find activities that are mentally stimulating and distracting that don't involve a screen for, the days where I don't want to, But yeah, it's a good question though. It is a good question because I realize that sometimes some of the things I say about disability, and that's the thing with disability, it's like a complex thing and it's going to vary from person to person. It's weird how one thing can hurt and then another thing can hurt less. Like, in my case, a really good example of that is drawing versus writing, which a lot of people who don't draw probably find very contradictory because a lot of people, well, most people can write by hand, right? But being able to draw a face is not something that everyone can do. And so I feel like a lot of people kind of think that drawing a face is going to be more taxing on the hands. So it can seem contradictory that I'm here, drawing a face, but I'm also like, oh, I can't type and I can't write with my hands. But it's weird, isn't it? How disability is sometimes can surprise you like that. And that's, it's something that it's not rude to ask. It's something that I like talking about because I feel like the more information there is out there about how disabilities can work, the more understanding there'll be, right? And that's part of the, all of this stuff that I'm talking about is stuff that I would like to include in, an eventual video essay about disability. Comparing drawing to writing with my hands, for example, or not comparing, but talking about how just because I can stand upright and walk 5 meters doesn't mean that I can walk to the shop, And for a lot of people who have never, considered all of this stuff. I mean, that's part of the reason I never show myself getting up on stream is because I'm still worried that people are going to be like, oh, so you don't need a wheelchair? You know, because there's this common idea that's been reinforced in media, films, all this that, if a person in a wheelchair can stand on their two legs for like a minute or two, oh, it means they're faking, they don't need a wheelchair, all of this stuff. When in fact, it's really not the case. Ambulatory wheelchair users exist. Exactly. I just thought it might be rude because you have to explain your stuff. I don't know, I quite like, me, I like rambling a lot. I don't think that's a rude way to ask a question. I think it's an interesting question to ask. And, I quite like clarifying things. I quite like being transparent about a lot of things. So, and I do perceive part of my role now on Twitch and on the internet as someone, I perceive it as part of, I'm okay. Let's just say I'm okay with having a bit of an educator role or an explaining role, or, I feel prepared to answer this kind of question when I start streaming, because I feel like it's kind of part of what I want to do online. So I don't see it as rude. Writing is such tiny, specific, complex shapes, 100%, while drawing can be loose and open and way less pressure. Yes, and this is why I defend the idea, and I will continue defending the idea. Whenever people say, oh, I'll never be able to draw, I can't draw, I always just reply saying, can you write with your hands? And when they say yes, I'll say, you have everything you need to be able to draw. You can create tiny, specific, complex shapes in a very tight space. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. People, I think, undersell themselves, undervalue themselves when it comes to drawing. People who don't draw. When in fact, writing is just so much more of a difficult activity physically. It's very, very demanding. Media loves the wheelchair user faking trope. Yes. That's something that I want to bring up in the eventual video about disability. It's scary. We never stand up from our wheelchair in public because there's so much risk of getting essential survival supports taken away if ignorant people report you. That's awful. I mean, I haven't really been in public a lot since having the wheelchair, but when I have been, I must admit, yeah, I don't really want to stand up, or when I stand up, I'm really worried, about people being like, oh, I see. Huh. A pretty common misperception is that disability is all or nothing. I worked in an art museum and people thought we were silly for working things out with the visually impaired. Yeah. Yeah, it is a very common misconception that disability is all or nothing. And yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And that really does all or nothing. Oh, if you can't write, then how can you draw? Oh, if you can't walk to the shop, then how come you can get up and walk 5 meters to, to the other side of your bedroom? All or nothing. Because I feel like, and I feel like part of the reason is surely if your disability wasn't all or nothing, why would you want to use a mobility aid if you had any leg function whatsoever? a lot of people can't wrap their heads around the idea that someone might need it sporadically, intermittently. I hope I'm not intruding on an important topic, but disability accommodations have always been such a hard get in rural communities that I saw the effects firsthand so often it was alarming. You're not intruding at all, Slobble, you diddly. What a great name. You're not intruding. I enjoy it when people chime in with their observations. And I think that, everyone in chat likes it when other people chime in with their observations because, there's this thing of, oh my God, I feel less alone knowing that, I don't know. It's nice to talk about it. I know that it's not something that this is basically the only space that I have to ramble so much about this. I mean, it's therapeutic, right? So, yeah. I think that the misconception is largely because disability in media is so often reduced to caricatures that mostly serve abled narratives. 100%, 100%. This strange fixation that some able-bodied people have on finding out if someone's faking a disability. Maybe they're getting money that they shouldn't be getting. Maybe they are just slacking off work. Like I feel like it can all be linked back to capitalism, and it can all be linked back to the society that pits us all against one another and that manufactures scarcity for resources when in fact there is largely enough to go around for everyone. Since disabled people are barred from public spaces by virtue of inaccessibility, so true. So true. Very, very true. Sorry, I'm smiling because I'm thinking about all the people on Twitter still tagging me saying, oh my God, you said go outside was ableist? Anyway, whatever. Their only experience with disabled people is those media caricatures. Very, very true. There have even been laws in some countries barring us from being visible in public in the past. Jesus. I think I've heard about that. The ugly laws here in the States are fascinating, and I'd like to learn more about them. Well, I have heard about it, but I just forgotten about it, and now I want to know more about it too, so I will look into that. Is it reductive to say that I feel so much disability accommodations aren't getting due attention because elected officials don't know or care about the struggle faced? It's probably more about money than humanity, but I want to believe ignorance is the biggest issue as opposed to arrogance. Yeah, I mean, I think there's both, right? And I don't think it's reductive. I think, it's hopeful to imagine that, the more people know about disability and the more people realize that disabled people have bundles and bundles and tons of value to add to society. That's the kicker though, right? It's the supposed value that disabled people can offer society. If they can't toil on their feet for 10 hours a day, then why accommodate them, right? Ghoulish, truly. I agree. I mean, the thing is I think the perception of what people add to society is just really, it's very based on able-bodied things. And there's not really, there just aren't accommodations for I don't know. Capitalism is a system in which the value of a human being is defined by their ability to produce labour for capital owners. Yes. And because of how things are set up, disabled people are often barred from both public spaces and, most jobs because, while accommodating for disabled people, as it was, mentioned before in chat, it costs monies. It costs monies. It costs money. It's just easier to not include us, right? It's easier to just be like, oh, this person can't toil on their feet for 10 hours a day, so let's just completely disregard just disregard them completely. Unfortunately, a lot of so-called leftists are really hung up on defining the value of human beings based on their labour, so disabled people get excluded from a lot of leftist spaces. Yes. Well, there's a very kind of reductive vision of what labour can be, and I don't know, there's just this perception that disabled people have nothing to contribute. There's just this perception of that. And I want to, I'm here to challenge that.